Well, good morning and happy Friday. My name is Sarah Bird, and I'm the Assistant Director of Statewide Services here at the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. And I'm really excited to welcome everyone to this webinar about the new FAFSA that just opened. So as many of you know, the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, is a huge part of paying for college when it comes to our students, their college decisions and their college going process. It is a critical step for a lot of our students and families. So today's session is designed to help give everybody a clear overview of what to expect with this new FAFSA that just came out, and a little bit about the financial aid application process, along with the most up-to-date information that you need to be able to support your students effectively. So we're really excited to have Jason Seay here, our FAFSA wizard and the Senior Director of Outreach at the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. A lot of you are used to hearing from Jason about the FAFSA, so we're really glad to have you here today, Jason. Thanks for joining us. And Jason is going to walk us through some key updates to the FAFSA, highlight any changes that are going on, any important things that you need to know about any federal or state financial aid programs, and to help answer questions along the way. So without further ado, we will just kind of cut to the chase here. And Jason, I will go ahead and turn it over to you and get ready for some questions in the chat.
Awesome. Sarah, thank you so much. Happy Friday, everyone. Sarah, it's been too long. Seriously, it's been too long since you and I've done a webinar.
It's true. Or
Yeah.
has it? Because remember, we were doing all those webinars when we were having all the issues with the FAFSA. So maybe it's better that we haven't been doing so
Well,
many.
I guess there's some truth to that, but I felt like there was kind of a rhythm where maybe every, say, 3 or 4 months we were doing webinars, and sometimes
It's
not
true.
just on FAFSA. So again, it's been too long. Obviously, guys, Sarah and I get to I have the honor to work with alongside Sarah each and every day. She's the best. So Sarah, thank you for this.
Thanks for being
Let's
here, Jason.
jump right in.
Love it.
I want to share. This is a little awkward. Let's go do that, and let's do that. Give me a second, Sarah.
Okay, no, you're good.
Do I have a full PowerPoint
Yep.
screen?
Full
Love it.
PowerPoint screen. Looks great.
So let's dive in. And for those that perhaps just joined, say 2 minutes ago, 3 minutes ago, 4 minutes ago, as we were, before we officially began this, let me set the stage. And hopefully in comments and chats, some of you have actually already done the 26-27 FAFSA with students, with families. I know last week it did open up early. It opened up last week, and no joke, guys. I mean, at least my experience last Thursday, best FAFSA ever. And you may be like, "Oh, Jason, that's just you being you." No, seriously, guys, I have heard that now since last Thursday from various colleagues statewide that have already jumped in and started helping students with the FAFSA pre-October 1st. So, hey, hopefully that is our new standard. So, it is available now. The application is available now at studentaid.gov. I think as most of you are familiar with at this point in time, FAFSA relies on that prior tax year data, as federal student aid refers to it. So specifically on this 26-27 FAFSA, families will be asked questions of their 2024 income and tax information. Our state priority deadline. So think about this as always from a priority deadline perspective. First and foremost, think the Tennessee Student Assistance Award. That is our version of the Pell Grant. For consideration, the student must have the FAFSA completed by April 1. Moreover, April 1 also is the Tennessee Promise FAFSA deadline as well. Sarah, I think you and I always like to say here, I mean, again, we use that word priority and I specifically highlight those two programs, but as a reminder for other programs, Wilder Navy, Hope Scholarship, and others, their deadlines are a little bit further out beyond that, at the beginning of a semester or a trimester even. So again, that April 1 deadline is specifically for TSEA and Tennessee Promise purposes. One thing I'm going to detail over the next few slides is the importance of as we know, this FAFSA has become role-based the last few years. but specifically the importance of starting the FAFSA from the student perspective. And let me pause for a second and let me reiterate this. For all students and all families this year. So in other words, we're no longer differentiating a family who are U.S. citizens versus a mixed status family where you have the student who's a U.S. citizen with parents who do not have Social Security numbers. This FAFSA is working, quote, for all families. And we should encourage all of our families to begin the FAFSA from the student perspective, inviting the parent, tackle that student section first, and then the parent will log in and tackle the parent section. So here's a little infographic about the steps. Step one, especially if you're working with high school seniors who are doing this for the first time and potentially a parent who is doing this for the first time. Step one, it's creation of those studentaid.gov accounts, otherwise known as the FSAID, otherwise known as the FAFSA account, whatever you label it is. Sarah, whatever the U.S. Department of Education is labeling it at this point in time. Bottom line, step one, specifically for the student, is to create their account, and the parent, quote, a parent needs to have an account as well. If they've never done the FAFSA, they will create an account as well. But obviously, we serve parents each and every day that potentially or for an older son or daughter. But bottom line, we need the student to have an account and the parent to have an account. Once the student has created that account, they will start the FAFSA by logging back into studentaid.gov. They'll complete their student section, and at the end of the student section of the FAFSA, they will invite their parent via email to send the parent a code. You will see, quote unquote, the big move 1, big move 2 here momentarily, but I'm just giving you an overview right now. And then they'll sign and submit the FAFSA. Once that's been submitted, meaning the student section, now the parent will log in to studentaid.gov. They'll, quote, start FAFSA, and they'll enter a code. And that code is what will now unlock the parent section of the FAFSA that they'll then complete, sign, and submit. And for the majority of families we serve, that will then lead to a completed FAFSA. So let's talk about studentaid.gov accounts, aka FSAIDs. As a reminder, nothing's changed here. As always, folks, we serve all families, right? And some families are different than others, right? This, that, and the other. But from that, hey, my parents are married perspective and they file taxes jointly. That is the classic example of I need the student to have an account. I need the parent to have an account. The point of this slide, as always, is to remind all of us that if parents are married or, quote unquote, the parent of record, let's say, is remarried to a step parent, and specifically if those two individuals who are married file taxes separately in 2024, that is the example where we would need that second parent to also have an account, because ultimately parent 1 would invite parent 2 to complete that second parent section of the FAFSA. Again, Sarah, I think our experience is, yes, we do experience this, obviously, but it's generally speaking, the majority of families I think we serve, it's typically we're dealing with one parent account and one student account. That leads me just to sharing big move 1 for all of us college access professionals, school counselors, financial aid administrators, higher ed professionals that work with families completing the FAFSA. The first big move and big update with this 26-27 FAFSA is the real-time Social Security Administration match. So folks, now when you're working with a student and or a parent creating that FSAID, that match with the Social Security Administration will be in real time. No longer do we have to wait 24, 48 hours for the Social Security Administration to match. It is in real time. So in other words, we're back, Sarah, to the days of we are able to create accounts and complete the FAFSA all in one setting, as opposed to having to wait multiple days. The other thing, because I know some of you have texted me about this, emailed me about this, in terms of what you've experienced, which I appreciate that as always, especially since well, again, I guess I've experienced now, but it's been a while. Or it's, say last Wednesday, and actually last Thursday before I began experiencing this, is if you're working with, say, an individual who accidentally enters the wrong Social Security number, when they create their account, they're going to get a message that we were unable to verify you with the Social Security Administration. So if that message is received, they will simply log in and go to settings and personal information and update that social at that point in time. Or, for example, if you have a student that instead of entering their quote unquote legal name as reflected on the Social Security card, let's say they entered their nickname for their first name or something like that, that's where they're going to be able to correct that right then and there. And it's also going to then go through a rematch, and assuming it matches, they're going to be able to rock and roll. So all this is in real time now. For those of you listening and thinking, well, Jason, what about our parents specifically that may not have socials? Any change with them? The answer is no, meaning this, we experienced this last year. Most of our parents without socials were able to, were being verified on the spot as well. I will say already this year, I have seen a few working with mixed status family and helping a mom or dad create their account. I have seen a parent be asked the TransUnion questions, which would tip off for you and me that they have a credit history. And so I have seen that where I did not necessarily see that last year. So the point is this process is quote unquote the same for everyone. Period. There's going to be that real-time Social Security Administration match, and for our parents without socials, they're going to be quote unquote automatically verified as well. But heads up, you might experience being asked the TransUnion questions. For example, Jason, which one of these phone numbers have you been associated with, right? And they'll select the one that they've been associated with, or none of the above, to answer the TransUnion questions. I have decided to begin using the slide during financial aid nights statewide for myself and obviously for the team as well. Just as a reminder for those parents that, hey, we did this FAFSA, say 5 years ago for an older son or daughter. I have an account. What do I do? How do I reset? Do I create a new one? Reminding these families that, hey, if you have created an account within specifically the last 9 or 10 years, parents, you simply need to go studentaid.gov, click log in, and at the login screen, you need to click where it says forgot email, comma, phone, comma, or username, and then FAFSA will assist you with hopefully resetting and retrieving based upon a mobile number, an email, and or answering challenge questions. But as always, professionally, if you're working with a parent specifically where that doesn't work, sometimes my advice to you guys, and it is on the screen, is if those didn't work, like in other words, they were unable to reset their account, maybe because the system says, oh, your mobile number doesn't exist, or that email doesn't exist, or, challenge questions do not exist. Try creating a new account, right? Because it could be that the parent had an account, say, 15 years ago, but that's when it was the personal identification number, not the quote unquote change to the FSA ID that happened. So I always encourage professionals, if the forgot prompts fail, humor me. Try creating an account. If in step 1, when they click continue after entering their name, social, date of birth, if they get the SSN's already in use message, now we need to either use the live chat feature via studentaid.gov and or call the 1-800 number. Sarah, I guess now a month ago, I did this training for our friends at the Nice Stronger Foundation. And then I think the next day did one for our friends at the Heirs Foundation. And it's great. We had colleagues at both trainings that says, Jason, the live chat at studentaid.gov is so much better right now. And so what they were experiencing was they had a parent that had forgotten they'd forgotten that they had created an account, and they live chatted at studentaid.gov. And, where typically sometimes there's a quote, maybe a 7 to 10 day waiting period, even for an account recovery. They said that within 45 minutes, the parent was receiving a link via email to completely create a new account. So for those, especially working with parents that have account issues, I would say use the live chat feature. For those of you that are going, well, Jason, Washington's closed right now for business. We received an email from FAFSA leadership the other day that, in fact, live chat in the call center, they are actually not impacted right now by the federal shutdown. So again, if you're working with a parent in real time or a student in real time that's having some account issues, they should be encouraged to live chat and or call, and someone should work with them. Sarah, I'll pause for a second. Any questions?
That they're getting to all that so quickly. I think that's really fabulous.
Yeah. Any questions so far we need to tackle?
Yes. One question, it's the only one that we've gotten so far. Catherine asked, when you were talking about the tax filing jointly, filing separately, she asked, so if parents are filing jointly, there is no need to invite parent two. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And specifically, I think the newness, and of course, once one new part, just to piggyback on that response of no, there is none. However, let's use the Jason Pam scenario, right? My wife.
Sure.
At the end of my FAFSA, right, where we filed jointly, the one thing that I experienced that's new this year is at the very, very end, I no longer have to identify my wife by name, social date of birth anymore. So that's been removed. But what I did have to do is I did have to identify my wife's date of birth. And that's because of the student aid index calculation, where in a married household situation, the calculation does look at the ages of each individual quote unquote parent to determine some of the charts that's used to determine the SAI calculation. Yeah. So is that all right now? Awesome.
That's all right now. Nothing else for now.
So, hey, good segue just right quick. Parent Wizard. I actually dropped this in the chat earlier for those, specifically for those of us that we are asked the questions of, parents are divorced, parents are separated, who does the FAFSA, this, that, and the other. As a reminder, FAFSA has done this has provided this great resource tool, not only for parents, but also for you and I as professionals, sometimes I have found it is best to share this resource and let FAFSA tell the quote family who needs to do the FAFSA in the situations where there's divorces and remarriages and this, that, and the other. Y'all know me. Y'all can throw scenarios at me, and you and I can work through them. Bottom line, generally speaking, in a divorce situation, it's which parent provided the most financial support. And as always, if that parent that provides the most financial support is remarried, then FAFSA is going to need that parent plus the step parent's information. If it's a 50-50 joint custody, joint support situation, FAFSA now says use the parent's household which made the most income in 2024. Again, that's what FAFSA says, but that's what they can learn if they use the Parent Wizard as well. And then as a reminder, who is not a FAFSA parent, most of us, I think, know this, but generally speaking, You show me a relative of a student that may be taking care of the student. That parent, that relative will not be the one that does anything on the FAFSA unless they've adopted them. And again, this goes down in the scenario um, road, I should say, that Sarah, you know this. We're always happy to entertain those questions now or after the fact, right? Because they can be complicated, they can be tricky. But just again, friendly reminder here.
Hey,
So,
a quick question for
yeah,
you,
yeah,
Jason.
talk to me.
Sorry, just going to interrupt real quick. So, one question I want to get to, and then the other one is, we might pause on. The first one, if a parent has an FSA ID from their own college financial aid when they were in college, is it the same FSA ID,
Yes,
or
it
would they
would
make a
be.
new one?
No, it should be. I mean, in terms of this, guys, remember, I'm going to say circa year, and by all means, anyone fact check me on here. Y'all know that. Fact check me. I believe it was like 2015. That's when the department, when we shifted away from the PINs to the FSCIDs. And at that point in time in 2015, anyone that previously had a PIN, Sarah, like yours truly, right? Back from the late
Mhm.
90s, where I had my FAFSA
Sure.
account was a PIN. I had to then create a new FSCID. So back to the question at hand, like if that person has done a FAFSA, say since 2015, if they've logged into studentaid.gov to check on their student loan balance or to make a payment, bottom line, that individual should already have an account, and they would just use the reset retrieve features to get that to reset it. Yep.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yep.
Another question here, this one is a little bit more situational and might be a little bit trickier, but somebody said they have a student who is a senior and her parents file separate tax returns and the parents make over six figures. The student is planning on getting married in March and her soon-to-be husband will not have a high income. So should she file her FAFSA now with her parents or wait until she gets married? We're assuming that maybe she would receive Pell funds if she waited until she were married.
Yeah, and in that sense, I mean, again, this is guys, hear me out. Last night, a colleague from Vanderbilt, good friend Samantha, and I did a co-presentation for a few local high schools via webinar, and Samantha had a great response from her lens, the Vanderbilt University lens, and she reiterated that really colleges can be different. And so me saying that from that state lens, right? From my state lens, your priority deadline is April 1, right? And to be considered for TSCA, to be considered for Tennessee Promise, if we're talking about a high school senior. But in this case, I mean, if we're really just worried about, quote, state aid, meaning like from an institutional lens, you as the college, for example, is only using FAFSA for state and federal aid purposes. Yes, then, Sarah, I would actually advise the student to hold off until March. After they become married, so that they are independent, and then they would use, she would invite her spouse to do the spousal section of that FAFSA, because they would have filed, quote unquote, separately in 2024. So I would advise that, unless, for example, you were dealing with a college that needed that FAFSA,
Or
for
at the time.
institutional aid purposes, right before
Yeah,
that deadline.
that makes sense. Okay, we have a couple more questions, but Jason, I want to make sure that we get to your slides, and some of our questions might be answered in the slides.
Yeah,
So I'm
gotcha.
gonna let you keep rocking and rolling. I'm gonna mark the questions and we'll get to them at the end.
Sounds good. So let's take just a stroll through this new FAFSA. We're not going line by line. We're just showing you kind of the big moves here. So as I said at the beginning, students, for this new FAFSA to work, students must start the form first. All right. So student creates their account. They're verified instantaneously. They log in. This is what they'll see from their desktop, their laptop view, right? They'll see their dashboard. They see something similar from their mobile number. They see that exclamation point with the information about, the save plan or whatever. But as they scroll down, they'll see the plan ahead, whether on a laptop or their mobile device. And this is where they'll click Start That 2627 form. This leads us to the second big move, which is the change in the parent invite. As we've experienced the last 2 years, what has frustrated us professionally is right, students have had to have their parents' name, date of birth, and social, and we all work with those families, right? And we respect those families, especially where the parents like, honey, I'm not going to give you my social, right? I'm going to do it myself or whatever. This is no more, right? This now, looking into the student section of the FAFSA, as you see, I guess, quote, Section 5 is the contributor invite screen. This is where the student simply invites the parent via email. They'll enter the parent email, click send invite. That will then indicate that the invite has been sent. They'll click continue, and then they'll go through the sign and submit process. Now, what that email contains, that the email that the U.S. Department of Education emails the parent is, it contains a code. And that code is what the parent will use to then unlock the parent section of their student's FAFSA. That code will also be presented to them upon submission of the student section. So, for example, next week, I'm going to be at Monday night, going to be at Big Picture High School. So working with parents and students there, again, I'm honestly probably going to be less concerned of parent, did you receive the email with the code? If the student and parent are working side by side, when that student submits their FAFSA, I'm going to say, all right, mom or dad, there's your code. Let's write that down right quick. Or if they're working on a separate device, that's when I'm going to give the parent the green flag to, all right, parent, you now start a FAFSA and you will enter that code and that will unlock the parent section. What does that look like? Again, when the parent logs in, they'll see their dashboard as well. They will start a new form, quote unquote, at the beginning as well. But when they hit this screen, this is a screenshot, quote unquote, from my FAFSA where it says, did you receive an invitation code? You'll click enter code, and this will unlock the student, the parent section of the student's FAFSA. So that is as easy as it gets. Forgive me, next slide. This is where they actually enter the code, hit submit, and this will now unlock that parent section of the FAFSA. So that's it, folks. That's how the parent invite's done. Now, it's no longer do you need name, social, date of birth. We simply need an email, or specifically, you need that code. That code's going to be in the email to the parent, but it will also display on that student submission screen. And then the parent will log in, start the FAFSA, click enter code, and that's where they'll enter it in the box. Sarah, we good? Good. Couple more screens, and then we'll entertain some more questions. As a reminder, the consent screen, nothing's really changed here. Just as a reminder for all users, whether it's a student or a parent, they are introduced to this consent screen. This consent screen essentially it must be approved by all parties, right? By the student, by the parent. If a second parent's doing the FAFSA as well, that second parent doing the FAFSA must be approved in order for FAFSA and the prospective college to determine eligibility for federal and or state aid. That being said, I'm bringing this up just to show you this, that where on the next screen, once you click approve, the screen will buffer momentarily. And I think for the majority of families we work with, we will see this success. That this screen tells us, especially from the parent perspective, that that the IRS was able to locate tax information, and that IRS tax information will be automatically transferred to FAFSA. As a reminder, the parent's not going to see that. It's not going to appear on the FAFSA submission summary any longer. Heck, I don't get to see that information within FAST anymore, right? So this is a positive screen. On the other hand, for some individuals, especially our parents without socials, for example, or parents who may not file taxes or whatever, you might get the, not successful screen. And that would simply mean that at that point in time, the parents is going to have to manually enter their tax information if filed. I had this scenario already presented to me once this week. And as a reminder, not that you and I have to be CPAs, but this is a good annual reminder. Here are the tax filing thresholds for 2024 tax purposes. Meaning this, if you are working with a parent who, or, a parent through a student where, we don't know if the parent filed taxes, this, that, the other, let's say we get the parent on the phone or the parent comes and meets with us. And, if we ask like, hey, did you work in 2024? Yeah, Jason, I worked in 2024. Then my next question would be, did you file taxes? If the individual says no, there may be a reason for that, right? For example, let's say the parent is a single parent. And so in this case, with a child, let's assume the head of household tax filing status. As you see here reading this chart, if the parent's under 65, when you are required to file taxes is once that parent earns $21,900 in 2024. So if a parent here you're working with is single and they're like, well, I worked last year, but I only made $15,000. Well, great. They didn't have to file taxes, right? Because they didn't make that 21.9 that would have prompted the requirement or whatever. So, just understand there are some reasons why people don't file taxes, right? And then on the flip side, there are some reasons why we may be having to teach some people why they should file taxes based upon this chart. So this is one of those helpful, I think, charts for all of us because I feel like we always encounter a scenario or two, when we have to think, all right, did this person have to file taxes? Oh, and Sarah, I should say, like from a student perspective, an 18 to 23-year-old, if let's say they worked on their own, and if a CPA advised them to file taxes, remember a student like that would just file single status. Look at the threshold. 14.6 is the threshold for a student to, quote unquote, is required to file taxes. So again, the tax thing, I'm not a CPA. I've always said I'll defer to a CPA in terms of does it behoove the student to file taxes, this, that, and the other. But, for those of us that work with students that may have made $3,000, $4,000, $7,000 from Chick-fil-A in 2024, but they didn't file taxes, understand they didn't have to until they earned $14,600. Sarah, that concludes our Accounting 101 lesson for this morning.
Love it. It's very helpful.
Let's talk assets while we're on the money talk just for a second. From a parent perspective, understand students are going to always see the asset screen now. However, there are some instances where the asset screen will be skipped. And as a reminder, those times when the asset screen are skipped is if based upon income, based upon that income that's going to flow directly for the majority from the IRS, if it's determined that the parent or the family is eligible for a maximum Pell Grant, the asset screen will be skipped. If the parent's adjusted gross income is less than $60,000, the parent assets should be skipped. And then finally, on the federal benefits received screen that you see here as an example, if the parent checks a box that indicates that they were a recipient because they qualified for one of the following benefits, like free and reduced lunch, like Medicaid, et cetera, that would also skip the parent asset screen. That said, one reason I wanted to present that is an update, probably the third big update. Last 2 years, family farms and small businesses of any size, that net worth was an asset, was now considered an asset. However, due to a recent legislation change at the federal level, we welcome back the exclusion of family farms that the family resides on, as well as family businesses with a 100 or fewer full-time employees. Those are now once again excluded from being considered a business and or farm on the FAFSA, right? So anyways, we're back, Sarah, to the 23-24 FAFSA and before, when again, family farms that you live in, those are no longer considered an asset, nor are family businesses that have 100 or fewer full-time employees. That's again, great move, especially here in Tennessee.
Yes. Yeah, that's really good to hear. I know that there were quite a few people who were worried about that when that change first happened. So love to hear it.
Sarah, we're actually, I think you and I talked about like, hey, Jason, why don't you do 40 minutes to do Q&A? Guess what? We're on target. Just
Yay!
we've already done these resources. We've already chatted them earlier. Just heads up, because I know, Sarah, you and I think both have been asked, and some of our colleagues have been asked, as a reminder on College for TN, under the financial aid section. And Sarah, aren't you so proud that I finally updated the screenshot to say financial aid?
Love it. I'm so
Anyways.
proud.
How to complete the FAFSA. That's where you'll find our recordings of completing the FAFSA. Let me be clear. I am working on simply updating the screenshots to reflect 26-27. I'm hopeful that will be done by next week. So for those of you that have asked myself or Sarah or our colleague Laura or anyone else on the agency team, FYI, those videos will be updated hopefully in the next week. But as always, we will share that out to let you know, like, hey, they are officially updated at that point in time. That said, if those of you are like, Jason, but we want resources today. Well, if that is the case, God bless, seriously, Sarah, God bless FAFSA, Federal Student Aid. You can tell, I'm going to say this. I can tell that they are in a good place with the actual application, because really for the first time in several years, they are on top of having their 26-27 FAFSA resources out and ready now. So I also dropped this link in earlier. If you Google FAFSA Central, you should get to it, but there's a link earlier that goes to the FAFSA Central resource page, which is everything that Federal Student Aid has produced at this point in time. Last screen before questions. And I shout out my friend Joy. Joy may be joining us from MMPS Virtual. Joy asked a great question via email yesterday, and I was like, I need to include this as a reminder, because, Sarah, this is another thing. We've not done this, meaning we've not done this presentation in October in going on, 3 years, right? Because the last 2 years we had
It's delayed.
Yeah. So as a reminder, we're back to can I say fall of 2022 in this case, where FAFSA is open. So now what we ask is just a little patience. Our FAST team has to prep the system. And typically they use this month into the first couple of weeks in November to prep the system, our system, to receive the 26-27 FAFSA records for students. So especially from a high school counselor perspective, and we respect that you would love to begin tracking FAFSA completion. Again, as a reminder, records will begin flowing hopefully by mid-November. As always, when that happens, the FAST team will email you. In addition to my outreach team, we will email you to let you know that that FAFSAs are beginning to download, and then you can begin checking your reports within FAST to begin tracking FAFSA completion. Again, hopefully by mid-November. Sarah, as always, if it's a few weeks earlier, great. We will email you whenever that begins. But right now, we're thinking mid-November is when we should be ready to begin downloading FAFSA records.
Perfect.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. What's up?
Okay, you might need to go back to sharing. I'm going to ask you two
Okay.
quick questions about
Sorry.
those codes for parents,
Yeah.
but then we'll kind of go backwards. So,
Yeah.
one question is if they sent a code to the wrong parent, how can they redo this? So, for example, if they invited their parent number two instead of their parent number one, can they redo that? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's one of those, Sarah. That's a good one. So there is, from the student perspective, I have seen, I believe, in the FAFSA prototype presentation that all of you can go out and change. If the student logs into studentaid.gov, they have the ability to edit their contributors. So Sarah, it would be that the student would log into studentaid.gov, scroll down to their My Activity page, click
Okay,
on that 2627 FAFSA form, and then from there on that screen, there should be an edit my contributors. That's where they can that's where they can edit and perhaps get that email sent to another parent. And Sarah, this we're assuming here. Let me be clear, and I think this is important. I think this is a great question. Shout out to the Nicewanger team again, and also the Airs teams, because both a colleague both reminded me of this. That email where you send that code to, Sarah, it
mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be specific to that parent per se. So, for example, um, let's say, I was working with you right now. I'm just saying this. Let's say I was working with you, your FAFSA, and you're like, Jason, I don't know my parents' email or whatever. Like, in theory, Sarah could email jason.c@tn.gov, or she could email herself just simply to get the code to then share with that parent. So Sarah, that's the,
Oh,
sorry,
I see.
maybe like this is the woo, my mind's blown a little bit. Like, in theory, folks, seriously, if you're working with a family whose parent does not by chance have an email right then and there, they're going to have to create one. But for purposes of getting this code, the student could simply email themselves, put that in the invite to get the code. Yeah.
Got
So
it.
answering it two ways there. Yes, they can go in, they can edit their contributor, and I think resend the email. But for those of you that are working out initially, another option is if for some reason that parent does not have an email address, the student could just email them, the student themselves, use the student email. Yeah.
Got it.
Lisa says,
Okay,
wow, I like that. I like the
thank you.
reaction. Wow. So
Wow. Okay, another question about the code. Does the parent go into their email for the code, for the invite code, or do they have to get the code from the student?
well, they can the email they receive from Federal Student Aid will contain the code. As I shared earlier on the confirmation screen of the student, if the family's like working side by side, the code will be on the student submission screen as well. Folks, this is where Sarah, like this is a team effort, right? I'm going to defer to what you've seen because I've only done one workshop this far, like in-person workshop. My workshops begin next week, and so hopefully I'll know a
Okay,
lot more next week. But here's another thing. That code may also be within the student's account as well. I
got it.
don't know that sure. I don't know that for sure, but I do wonder, thinking out that loud, if they go student logs in studentaid.gov, goes to FAFSA form, goes to manage my contributors. I bet that code's going to also be there. Yeah. So yeah, there's multiple places I believe that code is if for some reason the email didn't come through.
Perfect. Okay, that's it for the questions about the codes. The rest of the questions I am just going to ask in the order that they were asked to us. So this will be like our classic little rapid fire questions here, Jason. Some of these are situational.
Yep.
Okay, so first one, with the new mandate regarding no cell phones and Chromebooks not allowing access to personal emails, how are you working around it during workshops that are during school hours?
Yeah. And that's one of those, Sarah, and to everyone, I think that's something I need groupthink here in a sense. Um, so interestingly, I stated I did a workshop last week. The workshop was from say 3 to 5, so it was directly after school. So Sarah, in my case, no harm, no foul with
Sure,
cell phones. But
because
I
it's
will,
after school.
but I think, Sarah, you and I have heard statewide, even with say Tennessee Promise applications, um, and in some of our schools using the Tennessee Promise application creation time to also create FSCIDs. We are hearing that there are some leadership at schools that they quote fully understand there are times that cell phones might be needed, and that might be that 30-minute time block or 1 hour time block that the student's able to go and get their cell phone simply to quote unquote create their FSCID or complete the FAFSA. So ultimately for some of us as educators, that this is going to have to be a leadership conversation of,
Or
say like, hey, there are times to best serve our Tennesseans, that we need to consider a time where our students, at least for this one activity, to be able to access their cell phones, and then they can put them back up thereafter. I mean, that's what I've heard been happening, Sarah, at least at Scally, talking to some folks at Scally,
okay,
some of our
that's good to
colleagues.
know.
So there you go.
Perfect. Okay, next question. Someone said our school is 100% free and free lunch and
Mm.
breakfast. Do all our students need to select that they are eligible for free and reduced lunch?
Yeah, great question. This was one that was wrestled with the last couple of years until there was clarity, and the clarity is as follows: the student, or excuse me, and this would be a parent section question. The parent should only check that box if they would otherwise qualify for it. So
Okay.
so in other words, that's the distinction. They should only otherwise check the box if they actually would have qualified for it without the quote unquote mandate.
Okay, perfect. Next question for December graduates who are planning on starting college in January 2026, and they have to do the 25-26 FAFSA. They also have to do the 26-27 FAFSA and do all of the new processes and rules apply to the old, quote unquote, old FAFSA 25-26. So for example, does a student have to start the process and invite the parent? What if the parent has already started the FAFSA? So on and so forth.
Yeah, no, the great scenario. So first, I would say yes, they need to do both because, right, we would assume they would continue on their education fall 26 and beyond as well. So yes, they need to do both. Second question, no, comma, the 25-26 FAFSA is the 25-26 FAFSA. The 26-27 FAFSA is the 26-27 FAFSA. So the whole, like, you've got to start at student to parent would only apply, quote unquote, to the 26-27 FAFSA. Although
Gotcha.
for most people, Sarah, that would also apply for the 25-26 FAFSA. The exception for the 25-26 FAFSA was our mixed status families, where parents in that scenario would need to begin in the 25-26. I did ask this very question to FAFSA leadership, and that is how they answered it, which is no, do what you would otherwise do for 25-6 that you would have done for 25-26. What we just presented about 26-27, that's applicable for all student to parent. But for 25-26, it specifically for a mixed status family, I would reverse it. I would do a parent to student to do it. But then also,
Okay.
Sarah, the 25-26, that invite we would be back to name, social, date of birth, email requirement, right? Because again, that's the 25-26 FAFSA where you had to have the parents' social to invite them, and from an earlier question, and the parent spouse, you have to identify the spouse, right, on the 25-26 FAFSA by name, social, and date of birth as well. So again, the 25-26, what you know about it still would be true for a December grad needing to complete it.
Perfect. Great answer. Okay, next question. Parents who are never married, or have never been married, but they are living together,
Mm.
will they both create an FSA account for the student's FAFSA?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Because that is
perfect.
FAFSA considers that a two-parent household, otherwise married, even though they're living together, not married. And so in that case, right, assuming not married but living together but filing separately, both need to create FSCIDs. The student will invite one parent, and then that parent will invite their unmarried but living together parent to do the second part of the FAFSA.
Perfect. Okay, next question. A student is living with a friend and has been there for several months. I feel like this is like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I'm asking you all these questions, seeing if you can get the right answers. Okay, so a student is living with a friend and has been there for several months. This is by choice and not court ordered.
Mm.
Would he be considered independent? Will his parents need to complete the parent portion of the FAFSA? So on and so forth.
Yeah, and this is where I think it's fair for us to do this right quick, Sarah. If I may,
Sure.
I'm going to go to, I had these teed up just in case we needed them. Guys, when you ask that question about are they independent, remember, independence is determined based upon the personal circumstance questions that the student will go through. And as I think you've seen me in recent years try to teach these personal circumstances to hopefully make this easier for you as a professional. Think through these, right? Of the page of personal circumstances, I've grouped them as follows. There's the adult circumstances that if I'm working with a high school student generally would not apply, right? Because the kids would not be 24, they would not be married, they're not working a grad degree, they're not in the military, and assuming they don't have any children to support themselves, right? These wouldn't apply generally speaking. Then you have these minor circumstances, Sarah, to what you just asked, right? You said, well,
Sure.
this is by choice. Well, that tells me right there, none of these probably apply either, right? If quote unquote, you're telling me the scenario is the student has done this by choice. But as a reminder, if at age 13, student was in foster care, anytime 13 or thereafter, they'd be independent. If they're an emancipated minor, they'd be independent. Or if there was a court document indicating legal guardianship, then that would also indicate independence. Which then, Sarah, I think for this question really lands here. Again, what you've shared with us is this is by choice. Thus,
Sure.
I will ask counselor or high school district, do you consider the student a homeless, an unaccompanied youth who is homeless? You know, if you did, that would make the student independent. However, again, hearing this is by choice, my assumption is this is not going to apply as well. So bottom line, Sarah, I hear this scenario as the student will need to invite their parents' information. As always, there is the special circumstance screen where the student can say that they have a special circumstance.
Right.
But hearing that this is the student's choice, if it's the student's choice, I'm hearing this as this is student is dependent and they need to provide parents' information, and the parents refuse. God bless, but at some point in time, they're going to need that information, or else they're only going to be considered for an unsub loan.
Okay, gotcha. A couple more rapid fire questions, still kind of in the same vein though. When a student is in a situation where they do live with like a grandparent, aunt, uncle, how do they file? Single, homeless? I'm assuming the answer would be it would have to be like some sort of court order that would have
Yeah.
to be their legal guardian. Is
It
that
would,
correct?
the same thing that we just went over would apply. So first I would look for, does the grandmother have legal guardianship? And again, does the court document specifically use those words, legal guardianship? If the answer is no, then Sarah, it would be, do you consider them unaccompanied youth who's homeless as a school or school district, right? Again, if you
Mm-hmm.
do, boom, the student's independent. But if you don't, now we're at the situation where we either need to seek a special circumstance with the college to hopefully provide us independence, or we would ultimately need a biological parent's information. So, guys, any of those that have those type of scenarios, if we need to talk those through email or by phone, just let me know.
Perfect. Last one along this same vein, what if the student is expecting a child? So we have a pregnant student. Obviously, they're not technically supporting a child because they're still pregnant, although one could argue that that is still supporting a child. But at the time when they're filling out their FAFSA, but they will be supporting the child financially by the time they begin classes.
Um, that's a that can be a tricky one. Who's ever chatted that, will you email me that? And I'm talking about not Sarah, not you, but
No,
the
no, I know what you mean.
person. Here, I want to
In-
chat my email and phone number. Email me that scenario. That may be one we
Perfect.
want to talk through a little bit. Yeah, let's talk through that one.
Perfect. Okay. When the FAFSA is created, does it show them their EFC? Obviously, we know EFC is now their SAI, but when does that populate and like how and when does the student see that?
So per FAFSA, 1 to 3 days, it will be communicated within the FAFSA submission summary. I'm going to defer to all of us as we work alongside students. Remember, like last year, sometimes that SAI was calculated on the like your FAFSA's complete page, and then other times it wasn't. I think bottom line, I'm at least right now sticking to the once the FAFSA has been completed, 1 to 3 days. It should process, and then the student should be able to return, review that FAFSA submission summary, and that's where the SAI will be presented. Sarah, that said, FAFSA leadership is working on a real-time processing. That may be the next big FAFSA update, is a real-time processing where the student will see their SAI, all students would see their SAI upon completion instead of having to wait the 1 to 3 day processing period. That's what FAFSA leadership's working on right now.
Perfect. Okay, we got two more questions. We're doing great. The first one, does a student's spouse need to get a code like the parent does?
Yeah, Perry, great question. And the answer would be yes, how, yes, if the, if, so if it's Jason and Pam you're working with, right? Jason, the student who's married to Pam, and Jason and Pam married filing joint. In that example, Jason will act on behalf of he and his wife completing the FAFSA, and there will not be a code. However, Perry, I think as you and I worked through a scenario last year, if Jason and Pam, let's say, just got married and in 2024 they filed separately, that's the example where, yes, Jason would invite, quote, Pam, his spouse, by email, and then Pam would have to complete that spousal section because they filed separately in 2024.
Perfect. Okay. Amanda Villani also chimed in about the pregnancy one. She said that the FAFSA usually asks if the student will be supporting dependents in the school year to come, so the 26-27 school year. And so she said that when she has encountered that in the past, that she will have students say yes, since at the time that they're completing the form, the upcoming school year, they'll be supporting a student. Okay, last one here that I have for the chat. What if the parent has no social security number and has not filed taxes? Can they complete the FAFSA?
Yes, because right, all users must create an account. So the parent without social, you would have them to create their account. When it asks for the social, there's a little checkbox that says I don't have an SSN. Boom, that's what they'll check. So they'll create their account, which should be authenticated in real time. Back to the well, they didn't file taxes. That goes back to our quote unquote CPA lesson. And forgive me, right? You may have just been joining us. You may have missed that. God bless if that's happened. But there was that screenshot that I gave that we'll share out the slides later about like filing thresholds. So again, if parent is quote a single status, right? Never married or divorced or whatever, assume head of household. I think 19,600, Sarah, was, I believe, the threshold. So that's where I would ask that individual, how did you work in 2024? How much did you earn from work 2024? And based upon that, if they're like, well, I made $15,000 in cash, well, you didn't have to file taxes on that. You didn't.
Right.
Based upon IRS Publication 17, and stuff like that. So that's one of those. As always, if you're working with this, by all means, email me and we can walk through it. And Sarah, yeah, I'm thankful for several reaching out about about the student with child one. Yeah, the only one reason I said share it with me is I feel like there's been some chatter around. Sarah, seriously, right? You know this, where I'm kind of getting back to norm, right? I've
Right.
kind of missed, can I say, some of the nuance to some of the FAFSA changes that I just need to get comfortable with first. And one I felt like was with if I quote was quote with child versus the child being already born. I feel like there's
Mhm.
some nuance to this 26, 27 FAFSA.
Okay,
So before I
good
just
to know.
by tell you like it's verbatim this, I want to check the FSA handbook out right quick. And I'm sure y'all respect me to do that.
Perfect. Okay, those are all the questions that we have for now. Thanks, everybody. And Jason put his contact information there. So if anybody has any of those special circumstances questions, you can reach out either to Jason Seay or to your outreach specialist that's in your area. And we will go ahead and clip this recording and put it online. Jason, thank you as always for joining us on this webinar for TN, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks,
Thanks, Sarah.
Jason.
See ya.
Bye-bye.